right. All right, good evening, everybody. My name's Carrie Pang Chen, and I am the program director for a nonprofit organization called Rebuilding Together Peninsula. We're formerly known as Christmas in April, and we provide free repairs for low-income homeowners and community facilities throughout the San Mateo County Peninsula and Northern Santa Clara County. And we've been doing this work for about 22 years. And we're very proud to co-host tonight's event with United Policyholders and with funding and support from Silicon Valley Community Foundation. So thank you to Ellen, Clear, and the folks at the foundation for their support of our work here tonight. And thank you to the folks here at Bethany Presbyterian also for hosting, Pastor Don Smith, and to Mitch as well for keeping us in line. So we have a pretty straightforward agenda for tonight's meeting. Our goal tonight is really to provide some hands-on information to help all of you as the homeowners really think about the rebuilding process that you're about to be undertaking. I know many of you have been working through the claims process, and United Policyholders will talk more about that later on as well. We're going to start off the evening with Aaron Ackman talking from the city of San Bruno, and then we'll have United Policyholders provide a presentation. So Amy Bach, the executive director, will be leading that part of the meeting. And then they have also invited some survivors from the San Diego firestorm in 2007 who are here to share their experiences so you can kind of learn what it might be like for you 3 years out from now. So we're very grateful for them to have made the trek up here to join us and share their experience. Our organization has also put together a resource guide and referral list for some of you to help you think about the rebuilding process. So I'll be going through that part a little bit later. Then we do have some time at the very end for Q&A. So we really want to make sure that you all get your questions answered about the process that you're about to go through. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. There are some bathrooms right outside this door. I don't know if any of you did need childcare, but it's downstairs in the childcare room, and there's plenty of refreshments out back, and there's handouts from both our organization and all the wonderful organizers and jump drives that United Policyholders brought for tonight are also at the back of the room. So with that, we will get started. I'm going to invite Aaron to come and join us. Aaron's been with the city for 8 years now and 4 years as your Director of Community Development. So, Aaron.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to keep this really short. I'll get a chance to meet all of you if I haven't already met you over the coming year. Regarding the review process, as you've heard me say a few times already, the City Council adopted code changes, or about to adopt code changes, which will cut your review time in about half from what it usually is. For any type of residential review, there's generally, this is in any city, there's generally two types of review. You have your architectural review, where you take a look at what the home looks like and make sure that it's compatible with the neighborhood. And then you have your structural review, which is actually based on the building code. So that's when you look how the home's going to be supported, the foundation, everything up to the roof. Depending on how big your home is, you're either going to be in a one-step process or a two-step process. We have development guidelines which say you could build up to a certain floor area on your lot. For, let's say you have a standard 5,000 square foot lot, you would be able to build up to about 2,700, 2,800 square feet. And if you fall under those guidelines, it's just going to be a one-step process. You turn in your architectural plans and your structural plans at the same time. We take a look, we review them, and we generally get you back your comments within a week or two. Your architect will respond to those, and then we'll respond back to those in about a week. And my guess, it's going to take about a month to 2 months for that all to happen. If you do decide that you want to have a slightly bigger home and exceed one of those development regulations, the first step will be reviewed by the Architectural Review Committee. Usually what we do is you turn in your plans, you go to the Architectural Review Committee first, and then that's followed by a Planning Commission meeting where there's a 10-day public review period and we send out notices to the whole neighborhood. So we're basically cutting out the Planning Commission end of things and just have you done at the Architectural Review Committee. So that should add about another month on to the process. So if you have a slightly bigger home, it's going to take about 2-3 months. But we always encourage everyone to do. I have great planners on my staff, Matt and Laura. Have your architect call me or call one of the planners early, and we could give you initial feedback on your plans. I had a couple people just email me plans over the last couple days, and I could just give them comments right back that could speed up the whole process in the long run. So that's about it. We're always here. You could always call us. You could email us at planning@sanbruno.ca.gov if you have any questions, or give us a call on our general number, which is 616-7074. And we're always there, so give us a call or email, and we're happy to answer any of your questions. And I don't know if we want to answer questions at the end or individually. At the end, okay. I'll be here when you all have questions.
We'll move on to having Amy Bach come on up. She's the Executive Director for United Policyholders, and she's been a professional advocate for policyholders since 1984. And she co-founded and became Executive Director in 1991. Thanks, Amy.
Good evening, and thank you, Carrie and Aaron and the folks from the cable station that are going to make it possible for other people who aren't here tonight to get the information. And Aaron for coming, and all of you for coming out to yet another meeting. I know there have been quite a few, and so hopefully we were going to get in and get through some material fairly quickly and have the maximum amount of time to answer individual questions. And I want to acknowledge Emily Cabral, who's back there with the giant smile in the back of the room. And if you didn't pick up the tools that we're distributing tonight, feel free to stop by there. We want to thank and acknowledge the Silicon Valley Community Foundation that Carrie mentioned, and Ellen is here, and they've been really showing up at the town hall meetings and following your recovery, and I think it's much appreciated, and it's thanks to them that we're able to give out these organizers, which are designed just to help you keep track of your all those details that you have to deal with now and in the months ahead, and the flash drive, which is just to make it a little easier for particularly those of you who've had a total loss to tally up everything. And then for those of you who have partial losses, it's also useful. And it's, I'll just explain it a little bit more in a minute. So, so about our organization, very briefly, we've been around since 1991, and we did 2 years worth of meetings and work in the Oakland Hills after the wildfire that destroyed quite a few homes there in 91, and we developed a way of helping people get from point A to point B then that we pretty much have just continued to do over and over in areas where there have been large numbers of homes damaged and destroyed. And a lot of it is based on people helping each other and sharing information. And so, so what we do is we advocate for consumers and we help solve problems. We're not for profit, not for sale. That means we don't accept any money from insurance companies. We have an independent voice. We're a consumer group, which means that our main interest is your interest. So we have a national network of volunteers and limited paid staff. And then we offer an extensive free library of publications and resources online. Our website is uphelp.org, uphelp.org. We published a yellow book, the Disaster Recovery Handbook and Household Inventory Guide, which some of you may already have gotten. We can move on. So, as I said, we have been doing this sort of work for 19 years. In between disasters, we do a lot of work promoting preparedness. So we help people make sure they've got enough insurance. We help people do things in advance that make it easier if you ever do have a loss. Create an inventory, put your documents in a safe place, scan your insurance policy or scan your important documents so that if you, God forbid, have to evacuate, you can get easy access to them. And we do work with elected officials, public officials, and with people in the insurance industry to try to solve big problems. And usually the big problem is after an event like this is that people don't have enough insurance to put back their homes or replace their things. And while that is probably going to be a problem here, there is this backup with the PG&E fund, which is a very unique and valuable resource for your community. So next. So we've already talked about the organizer. I wish we could have gotten them to you a little earlier, but you have it now. It's a good way of, as I said, staying on track. The flash drive we mentioned the library. The Find Help Directory and Ask an Expert are two resources that we offer. One, the Find Help is if you think, I just can't do this anymore, I want to hire a public adjuster, or I want to hire a lawyer, or I need an estimator. We do have a directory at our website of professionals who have supported us or who have done volunteer work for us, or in some way we have an understanding that they have expertise that will be helpful. And then the Ask an Expert is an online Q&A forum, but for those of you who are members of the Yahoo group, the Glenview group, you have access to us through that because if you have a question and you put it up there, we're going to answer it. So our Ask an Expert forum is just a sort of another variation on that. It's just a way for you to ask questions without having to come out to a meeting. And then we offer this support network, the Disaster Survivor Support Network. And Ken and Nancy Wallery, who came up from San Diego, are part of that. And that's a program where we have 160 volunteers who went through catastrophic loss. Actually, it's wildfire, all of them. At this point, and they've gone through some training, and they're available to offer a listening ear and moral support and some emotional support because they've been in the shoes that you walk in now, and they're just available to help. And you can email them or call them, and we have a list available which you can get. You can just call our office in the city, which is the 415-393 9990, and we'll shoot that list to you. It's not in here, is it, Em? It is in here. Okay, so then never mind. In your packet, we actually have the list of our DSSN volunteers, and we have them listed by insurance company. So if you are insured with State Farm and you want to talk to somebody else who was insured with State Farm, who went through the whole process and repaired or rebuilt, then you can look on the list under State Farm and you can pick somebody from the list. Okay, we already talked about the organizer. We can move on. The help resources that are available in the community. The city has been amazing. We've worked in a lot of disaster areas where the local officials just don't know where to begin, and this, you don't have that situation here. You've got a very responsive local government that's been, I think, amazing. You've got a very healthy network of faith-based and nonprofit organizations that have been on the ground from day one. The Red Cross, Thrive, our organization, Rebuilding Together. Congresswoman Spiro, as you know, has been a resource and continues to be. The two foundations we've got listed there, we mentioned Silicon Valley, also the San Francisco Foundation is helping out. There are attorneys in the area that are providing legal help and damage compensation support for all of you. professional claim and construction help through public adjusters. The Greenspan Company is here. I think some people are working with them, and they are very knowledgeable and available to answer questions. And then you have the PG&E programs, which I think all of you know about the fund, the money, but there's also some other programs that they are wanting to offer, and I think they're continuing to refine the details, and they will be offering more information on those programs, and I think it's good to know that they're out there. There's the buy your house possible option. There's the we'll help you with the construction supervision, but again, you're going to want to get that information directly from them and factor that into your decision making. Our basic approach at United Policyholders is to give people information and resources so that they can make good decisions. Because usually after a major loss, most people primarily need money. And the place they usually get it is from their insurance. And because a large insurance claim is not like a car, your fender bender or your typical interaction you'll have with an insurance company, most people go their whole lives without ever making a claim, or maybe they make a little theft claim or an auto claim, something in the nature of $5,000 to $10,000. But if you're dealing in the six figures with an insurance company, or you get up into the higher dollar amounts, things can get much more complicated, and you really need to have a bit more of a sense about the process, and it's a lot more like a business negotiation. So, top 5 tips that we give: know your rights and be proactive, and we give you a lot to do that with. Our library, our sample forms, our letters. Think of your insurance claim as a business negotiation. Try not to take it too personally, but just understand that you're not on a level playing field, and the adjuster may be friendly, but they're not your friend. They are. They have their job to do, and your job is to figure out how much you need to be made whole, and then do what you need to do to get that. And the way to do that is to present clear requests in writing that explain what you need and when you need it and why. Of course, very important not to pad or exaggerate your loss, and then get the right help if and when you need it. And for a lot of you, you've had just a tsunami of information coming at you from the beginning. Much of it is of course, it's well-intentioned, and some of it people are trying to sell you things. Some of it is on the level, and you're trying to filter it all through. But at the end of the day, whether you're going to be getting your compensation from a lawsuit, or from an insurance company, or from PG&E, you need to understand what your loss was and how much is it going to cost to put you back where you were. I'm not talking about your emotional losses. I'm talking about your physical losses. What kind of work has to be done at your house if you had a partial loss? Who's going to do it? How much is it going to cost? What kind of professionals do you need? And then the same thing with your possessions. How much of your stuff got damaged or destroyed? What were the values of all those things? How much is it going to cost to put those things back? And until you really get to those numbers, it's really hard to move forward. And I think one of the challenges that I've seen for your community, and we've been going to a lot of the meetings and following the developments with the pipeline, and I think it's probably been a little bit hard to focus on documenting your losses because there's been a lot of other things going on. Who do I go to first? Am I going to my insurance company? Am I going to PG&E? What am I supposed to be doing here? So this is why we wanted to get together with Rebuilding Together and offer you some sort of clarifying guidance on, okay, what do I need to be focusing on? And everybody goes at their own pace. I met people after Oakland you know, people who maybe were in the construction business, or a guy who's an architect, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna be the first one back on my block. And he was just type A, you know, he got out there, and that was his thing. You know, whether he got the house he could have gotten if he had taken his time, I don't know, it doesn't matter. That's what he wanted, and that was his pace. Other people, that's not their pace. And whatever your pace is, it's fine. You know, and it's just a matter of understanding that you've got to document your losses. And if you don't want to do it yourself, there's plenty of professional help out there to do it for you. And there are ways to hire that help economically. And again, we're just here to give you your menu of options. Okay. Your deck page is a map. If you picked up this folder, the deck page is insurance lingo for declarations page. And one of my favorite items in our library is this guide to your declarations page. And your declarations page may not look anything like this. How many people actually have their declarations page and know what it looks like? Okay. So that's basically that first page of your policy that tells you how much coverage you have for each of those categories: dwelling, structures, personal property, loss of use, and then it'll have your address and all that. So that's the map to your policy. That'll tell you whether you have coverage for complying with building codes. And the deal with that is, you know, your insurance company covered the house that you had, right? Just the way it was built, with the wiring and the wood and whatever, however it was constructed, right? The foundation. Well, maybe the building codes have changed since the house was built, and you have to put back a slightly better house because it's no longer safe to have that old wiring, whatever. So the insurance companies will say, we don't pay for betterment. We don't pay for making your house better than it was, but that's why you hopefully have building code upgrade coverage. And if you don't have it, then that's an issue to take up with whoever sold you the coverage, because I think everybody should have it these days. It's pretty much required. Okay, next. Just a bit of lingo: actual cash value, ACV, replacement cost, extended replacement cost, holdback and recoverable depreciation. That's an important, depreciation is one of those sort of cold, cold water in the face that a lot of people have to encounter after they've had a big loss, because it's very confusing. Why did my insurance company, why did they say that this was the amount of the loss, but then they paid me something less than that? I don't understand. Why are they depreciating my stuff? And what happens, and we're not going to go into like all the details here, I just want to give you kind of the gist of it, is generally you can recover what they held back. They will hold back a certain amount on what they pay you, both on your dwelling and your contents, until they feel that, until you give them proof that you actually have spent the money to repair or replace. And then they will give you the difference, but you have to go back after them and give them the proof. So I just had somebody call us today from Orange County, somebody who burned down in 09. So 09, right? We're here in 2011. He's just now going back to his insurance company to get the difference, the depreciation, that the holdback that they held back on his contents claim. So they paid him a certain amount on his contents claim, right? He did his inventory, he put it in, they paid him a depreciated amount, they held back, and now that he's replaced a bunch of his stuff, right, he's going back to the insurance company, and he called us to say, I didn't keep receipts for every single little thing that I bought. You know, it's like years and all this crap, and, you know, for the kitchen, whatever, but I have my credit card statement. Can I give them that? And yes, you can, okay? So, but you have to have some kind of proof. You know, insurance companies are just geared to require the paperwork. So it doesn't have to be exactly the paperwork that they say they need. You can be a little creative, like we just went through this whole thing with PG&E, where they are asking people to sign that release, giving them the right to talk to your insurance company. How many people here were given that release by PG&E, giving them authorization to talk to your insurance company? Okay, so you know that when they first threw that out there, for those of you who are on the listserv, people thought, well, if I don't sign it, am I not cooperating? What's going to happen? And we thought it through together, and we actually asked the PG&E folks at a Department of Insurance forum, some of you guys were there, hey, you know, people don't feel comfortable signing this broad release. How would you take some other proof? They want to know. PG&E says we don't want people double claim. We have to be careful. I get that. You know, we want to make sure that you are not coming to us for things that your insurance company already paid you for. I understand that. That's a fair thing. But so we said, okay, and they said that's why we need the release, so we can talk to the insurance company and make sure that you are not getting paid twice for the same thing. And we said, fine. How about if the person gives you an alternative source of proof, they tell you, they'll sign something saying, this is how much I got from my insurance company. Is that okay? And they said yes. So just because, you know, if you have some proof that is proof, it doesn't have to be exactly the way your insurance company says they need it. You can offer it as long as it's good documentation. Okay, moving along. Okay, you, under an agreement that was put into place some years back, because this was a disaster, you can ask your insurance company for an advance on your ALE of up to 4 months. Just briefly, ALE expenses are, you probably already know this, are generally, you have to incur them and then you have to go back and ask for reimbursement. But because of this 4-month deal, you should, if you haven't gotten a good hefty advance, you should ask for it. Again, I think I don't want to go into too much more detail here, but on the ALE, if you're not sure of what expenses you can be asking your insurance company for, besides the ones everybody knows about, you know, your temporary rent or extra gas, you can ask them. By law, they have to give you a list of typical ALE expenses. Okay, we can move on. Your dwelling claim, I want to very briefly mention the key phrase. You're going to be hearing about that from Rebuilding Together, scope of loss. And that's really what I was talking about earlier. What is the size of your loss? What are the quantities of the items? What did it look like here? Was it, you know, if in the case of a total loss, you know, how big was your house? How many square feet? What kind of finishes? Not the pricing. It's different. A scope of loss just talks about a picture of everything, right? And once you have gotten to that agreed upon scope, ideally, it's great if you and your insurance company agree, you know, yes, it was a 2-story house, and yes, it was 1,800 square feet, and yes, it had, you know, oak floors, and yes, it had double pane windows, or whatever it is. That's the ideal, is you and your insurance company agree on that scope, and then you get prices on it. And that's the best way to avoid disputes, because then you can, if there are disputes, if your insurance company says, we think the roof, you guys, you know, we think you're way too high on the roof. Okay, you can talk about that and you can say, all right, let's isolate where the disagreement is. But if you're not talking about the same scope, you can be fighting for a very long time. So there are ways to get help with the scope of loss. You can hire somebody to do it for you. You can hire a public adjuster to do it for you. You can have a contractor do it. We have some samples on our website that I recommend you look at to see what a good scope looks like. And then once you have the scope, you can get prices on it, and then you can try to negotiate a settlement. Contents claim, again, under this agreement that I mentioned earlier that gives you the right to ask for a 4-month advance on your temporary living expenses. You also can ask for an advance of up to 25% of your contents limits. They're supposed to, your insurance company is supposed to relax the itemization rules on your contents inventory. Again, because this is a disaster, they should let you give them grouped items in, 100 books instead of going, Treasure Island, Exodus, whatever, listing every book. They should relax that. You can ask them to waive the itemization requirement. I mean, we have found over the 19 years we've been doing this work that one of the most painful experiences for somebody who's lost a home or part of their home is to try to struggle to remember, on top of all the emotional pain of everything that the wonderful things that they had and lost, to like relive that over and over and try to remember. It's brutal. It's just emotionally devastating, and it's really time consuming. So over the years, we have tried to develop as many tools as we can to help ease this burden. That's why we have the flash drive. But you also can ask your insurance company to waive it, to say, okay, all right, I had, let's say, $200,000 worth of contents coverage. I know I had at least that much of stuff, but frankly, I really don't want to go here with you. I can't. So I'm willing to accept 80% of the 200 if I can just not have to list everything. Now, you can ask. There's no guarantee they're going to say yes. And, it's entirely possible they'll say no. But, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And in the last wildfire that we worked on in San Diego, we encouraged people to try it, and some of the insurance companies went for it. And we have a survey that's posted on our website that showed that State Farm, for example, waived the itemization. I'm talking about waiving the requirement that you list every pepper, salt shaker, every box of aspirin, whatever. We have proof that State Farm, among other companies, did waive that requirement for a lot of people. So you can ask. They're contractually allowed to say no, but they might say yes. Okay, moving along. Partial loss fires can be harder to adjust than total losses. There can be a lot of dispute. How's the air quality? Can you paint over this, or do you have to tear it out? A lot of you are having issues with your roof. Is the seal bad? Is the seal okay? Do I have to replace the whole roof? Part of the roof? There can be a lot of, was this damage pre-existing, or was it from the fire? Was it the heat? You can have a lot of arguments between experts. One guy, it's amazing how you can have a damaged home and you can bring in 5 guys who have similar skill set. They're all builders, and you're going to get 5 opinions over what needs to be done. Hopefully, you pick your guy or gal, that you feel comfortable with, and you can go with their opinion. But unfortunately, these are not usually all that black and white when you have a partial loss. Okay. Other items, a lot of you had trees and shrubs that were destroyed. You have insurance coverage for that. Your collections and valuables, people very often find they're underinsured on those items. That would be something where you're going to go to PG&E. The vehicle claims, again, that same special agreement that applies to disasters with insurance is that vehicle claims are supposed to be settled on an expedited basis. So if you haven't already gotten a vehicle claim settlement, you can call the Department of Insurance and get help from them. And then finally, subrogation, and that just means that probably what's going to happen here is whatever your insurance company pays you, they will then turn around and get back from PG&E, and that's subrogation. Mostly all you need to really know about that is just that both PG&E and your insurance company, of course, would be happy to pay out less. That's just logic, and that's why you have to do a little bit of homework just to make sure that you get what you need in terms of your repair costs. Moving along. Okay, so we already talked about our wonderful Disaster Survivor Support Network volunteers, and the Ken and Nancy, who came up here to share some of their experiences with you. I'm going to just briefly run through your, whatever you have in here is, it's a more detailed explanations of some of the topics I covered. We have a sample letter in here that you can use if you think about your additional living expense coverage with your insurance, if you want to get more information from your company. We've got tips on ALE. We've got the guide that I told you about for your deck page. We have a wonderful tip sheet here on how to write good letters to your insurance company, how to communicate with your insurance company, how to, what we call speak up. And in closing, I'll just tell you what that means. Strong as possible under the circumstances, politely assertive, don't make enemies if you don't have to, but don't be a pushover. Educated and empowered, that's why you're here. Asking questions, keeping a claim diary, that's why we gave you the organizer. Unwilling to be shortchanged, that's the you. And P, proactive. So speak up, and thank you for your attention.
Well, I'm Nancy Wallery. Hi. I am, Ken and I came up from San Diego. We lost our home in the '07 wildfires. We have a daughter who was 15 at the time that was still living at home with us, and our son was in college. The house was a total loss, and we understand the emptiness that you're going through, because we've been there, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about that you're not sure where to go from here, because we were at quite a loss for quite a long time. We first learned about United Policyholders when they came to our rescue in San Diego with another organization who, you can go ahead and flip it to the next slide. They came to and team worked with us to help us figure out how we were supposed to pick up and rebuild our lives. And it was a godsend. If it hadn't been for these kinds of meetings where we got to learn the do's and the don'ts, have a sense that you're not in this alone, and you can you get some tools, some information, you start developing strength and confidence, and start planning the direction you want to take. And as soon as you start making those steps, you start feeling like, I can do this, and then things start falling into place, and you feel like you're going to see an end to this one day. Ken and I took pretty much a teamwork approach, even though we both worked on all aspects of the claim. It kind of fell down into Ken was handling the coverages A and B for dwelling and other structures, and I kind of got the contents and the additional living expenses things. But there was a lot of crossover. We were doing a lot of stuff together. It's just the detail work kind of broke down along those lines. Go ahead. That's what we got after all of our hard work. And we're recovered, but you still have a lot of stuff that follows you along for a while, and you still remember stuff, and you still wonder, oh, did we get that on the list? What happened to that? That the kind of stuff will stay with you, and you get over it. You learn to accept it, and you've got this whole new life that you're looking forward to with a new house. Go ahead. One of the things that happened in the first week after the fire, I got a call from an acquaintance of mine who was an attorney that I really didn't even know that well. But he called and said, I just want to let you know that your adjuster is not your friend. He didn't go into a lot of detail, except that, he says that insurance adjuster, while compassionate and looking and representing your claim, he's really looking out for the company first, the insurance company. Be careful what you say. Don't start sharing things like, well, this wasn't all that bad, or this was, it'll come back to haunt you. You want to just be pretty straight up honest, but not getting carried away with what you share with them, because ultimately it will go back to the company, and it could be held against you. We were technically underinsured as far as our dwelling coverage, but we had a total loss endorsement that gave us an additional 50% coverage on top of what that coverage A limitation was, and that's what pretty much saved our bacon, because we were going very watching what our expenses were and what our coverage was, and very concerned for the longest time that we were not going to have enough to rebuild the house until we had assurance that that extra 50% was going to be there. Large loss claims are not treated equally. We had people, we were with Hartford, and we had other people in our group who were with Hartford, and in these meetings and afterwards we would talk and share notes, and it's like, wow, their Hartford adjuster was doing things differently than our Hartford adjuster. So you can't count on what State Farm does is what all State Farm people are going to do. The adjusters have a lot of latitude to handle the claims kind of differently in some ways. I say avoid a public adjuster. That's pretty much an individual decision that we made. That was another one of the early calls I got after the fire, was a public adjuster offering his services and saying, it's not going to cost you anything, not going to cost you anything. I said, well, yeah, it is. It's going to come right off the top of my insurance money, and I'm going to need that money to make sure I can rebuild my house. We didn't feel that that was a good use of that money. Wasn't sure that it was in our best interest to allow them to do that. And really bothered us that the adjuster would become the official contact person for between us and the insurance company, so that if we wanted to talk to our insurance company, they would no longer talk to us. That adjuster then takes precedent, and we would not have the ability to negotiate directly with them. And we didn't like that idea. We were more of a hands-on way that we wanted to handle our claims. So that was the point I wanted to make on that. Separate bank accounts, hopefully somebody's already told you this, but it's a whole lot easier on your accounting if you open up an account that handles all your construction type of money, a separate one for your contents, and a separate one for your additional living expenses. And then the accounting is always very easy, what went in, what went out, and you don't have to keep separate ledgers, and it just made things a lot easier and more straightforward for us. Scope of loss, we did not do one. There was a lot of talk about us doing one, but that's really, it's not, everyone does not need one. It really depends on how your insurance company wants to work your claim with you. And actually our adjuster didn't even know what a scope of loss was. So we thought that at that point, we thought this is not someplace we want to go. So they were pretty open to the kinds of things we were trying to do, and we made it very obvious that we weren't trying to pull anything, and we got pretty comfortable with doing this, and Ken will explain more about how we worked around the scope of loss. And now Ken will take over with that.
Don't worry, she'll be back. I guess that's not going to go up. At the expense of maybe being redundant, I do want to say, okay, they can probably hear me without it. Thank you. I just want to reiterate that United policyholders and all the affiliated organizations that are involved with you, they are your friends, and please use them. They were lifesavers for us in guiding us through this long path of recovery. So make sure you overuse them, if anything. The other thing I want to say is your neighbors who are going through this, they're your friends also, and I know a lot of our neighbors that we didn't know very well before our fire event, we know them a lot better. And just constant communication between yourselves and comparing notes and asking questions, it's a tremendously powerful tool. It really educated us as a group as opposed to individual islands trying to find this stuff out by yourself. And the listserv was especially powerful. You're a pretty tight-knit community. You know, our event was 30, 45 miles spread throughout the county, so our listserv was really effective because we're talking to people 30 miles away and comparing notes, and there's a lot of commonality. So use the listserv, it's very powerful. Talk a little bit about Coverage A, our experiences. And to be honest, I didn't know a lot of these terms before this happened. Obviously, Coverage A covers the rebuild and design of your home. Code upgrades, I didn't know that. I think someone told me make sure you have code upgrades in your policy and find out what it is. So you need to ask those questions. Because as Amy said, insurance needs to pay to rebuild your house, and you won't be able to rebuild your house unless you upgrade to current codes. So sometimes there may be some resistance, find out. Inflation guard, I didn't know that was in the policy. And it may be only 1%, 2%, 3% a year. If your face value of your policy is 5 years old or 10 years old, I mean, that's worth some good money. So make sure you know the actual policy coverages, including inflation guard, if you have it. Demolition and site clearing, I understand you've done some sort of a group effort, but I didn't know that that was something separate from rebuilding my house until I got into this. And landscaping is also another separate pot of money that should be available to you. So we're talking about scope of loss. We didn't do one. It largely depends on your insurance company, whether you need to do one or not. We approached it a little different because Hartford, in the end, actually treated us pretty well. But in the beginning, we had to work with them. It wasn't as forthcoming as we thought it should be. I know the first thing Hartford did was send I'll call them an appraiser. They were doing their own scope of loss, even though they didn't know what they were doing. They were appraising what I had lost. I remember a week after the fire, and I'm standing over my home site, and the debris is still there, and he's interviewing me, and I'm still in a kind of a state of shock. And he's asked me, how many bedrooms did you have? What was the flooring in the kitchen? What kind of countertops did you have? To be honest, I probably wasn't totally accurate. You know, you're kind of in a fog, and I know you've been where I was. So the bottom line is, they do their own appraisal. Most of the time, they're not accurate. I mean, they don't know the construction quality of their house. They didn't even ask me the questions that would have led them to the construction quality of the house. So that's maybe, if there's a differential there, that's maybe a time you want to do a scope of loss. And I'll explain what our approach was in a little bit. Can you go back one? Even if you get a scope of loss, and it's probably obvious, but I'll just reiterate it, don't settle your claim based on a scope of loss. I mean, you want to make sure your house is rebuilt before you settle the claim. So we'll go to the next one. I want to talk a little bit about construction contractors. You can't separate that from your insurance. Again, the insurance is supposed to rebuild your house. So you have to have some knowledge of what it's going to take from a real contractor who's going to build your house. Get your design done as soon as you can. For us, it really helped us move forward emotionally. It starts you thinking forward instead of what happened to you. You're starting to think of your future. And actually, it helped us kind of heal, because we were thinking, well, what remodels were we going to do in the house anyways? We had a whole list of things, and like most of you, our budget, we can only do things piecemeal. So everything that we wanted to remodel, we said, well, now's the time. Let's put it into our design. And that really helped the healing process and helped us move forward. Create your own specification sheet. Even if you're not a contractor, even if you don't know construction, you know what you want in a house. Just list room by room what kinds of things you want. I mean, you might want brown switch plates, put it in there. If you want can lights in your dining room, put it in there. If you want a recirculating hot water pump, put it in your specification. Just in layman's terms, list everything you want room by room in your house. And I call that a specification sheet. This is going to help whoever designs your house, or if you choose an architect, it'll help them incorporate all these elements, and you can use that as a checklist as you're reviewing your plans. It's also going to help. I also provided this to my contractor for the bid process. Yeah, you have a whole set of blueprints, but blueprints aren't as detailed as some of the things you're going to have in your spec sheet. So give them both. You're going to bid both the prints and the spec sheet. Biggest one, and I'm amazed how many of my neighbors didn't do this. They just went to the first contractor they thought they liked and said, okay, give me the bid and let's go. Get multiple bids. This is probably because of my background. I'm a process and manufacturing engineer by profession. I do a lot of project management. I never built a house before. I never wanted to build a house. But at least some of these tools in my project management background do apply. And I really am a proponent of getting multiple bids. We got 5 bids, and they were all over the map. It really educates you. Every bid that you look at educates you. Every time you talk to those contractors, it educates you. And if they look at your plans and they'll question something, maybe that's a good question. Maybe you need to go back to your designer and iron something out in your plans. So multiple bids is really a benefit, and it's going to help you with your insurance company. I'll throw this term out here, fund control. I didn't know what the term was before. I'll just say it really helps you manage your construction project, and contractors really like it. Some of them may not know it, but they really do like it. And just write down the term fund control, and I hope there's some organizations here who do that up here, but it really helped me out, so I recommend it. Once you choose a contractor and you have a contract, that's really what it's going to cost to rebuild your house. And to me, that's where the rubber meets the road. That is the $1 figure that you can take to your insurance and say, this is what you need to pay me so I can get my house back. Scope of loss is fine, but no one's going to build a house based on scope of loss. An appraisal is fine, but no one's going to build a house based on an appraisal. A building contract to your plans, to your specification, is your biggest negotiating point with your contractor. And again, if you have multiple bids and you know kind of the low and the high end of what it might take to rebuild your house, you are that much better educated than even the insurance adjuster and the insurance company. So you have power. You have the document. This is it. So that's why we didn't do a scope of loss. I went with a multiple bid process, and I says, we're not going to settle a claim until I know what it's going to cost me to rebuild my house. But be careful. Obviously, the insurer is not going to pay for improvements to your house, something above and beyond what you lost. I said that. Now, it's kind of a vague area. You know, code upgrades, that's a vague area. If you had a high-end home that was built 30 years ago, like ours was, and you had Formica countertops, that was fine 30 years ago, you're not going to get the value out of your home if you put Formica countertops back in. So that's the negotiation point. That's where it's a little bit vague. And again, obvious, don't settle your claim until after you rebuild your house. Constructing a house is very complex. There's almost no way that you can foresee everything in your design that you need to rebuild your house. Example for us, right away we were preparing the pad, recompacting the pad, and we had some compaction problems. Apparently 30 years ago they didn't have the same requirements as they do now. So our soils engineer says, well, you're going to have to put some more stabilization in. We had more expenses. There's no way you would have known that until you started with the graders in there moving dirt. Something simple like we didn't put in for our window coverings. We had shutters. We forgot to put it into our scope of loss, into our specification. We just went back to the insurer and says, hey, we forgot this. Obviously, we need window coverings. And Hartford was very good about it. The one reason they were good to us, I think, is we had a lot of documentation, and we weren't that far off from their appraiser. I say that appraisals are wrong, but they had no question that it was going to cost what we showed them to rebuild our house. Now, we had a little advantage. 2007, construction business was in the tank. A lot of good contractors were hurting for work, so we had a little advantage that we got some real good bids from some real high-quality contractors. I don't know the exact situation in this area. I know construction is still slow, so you may still have some advantages there in terms of getting some pretty good bids for reconstructing your house. A little bit about code upgrades under coverage A. They have to cover it. They have to provide you to rebuild your house. You need to push back on them. If they're resisting, I still say you push back. They're trying to outlast you. If you have the wherewithal, push back as often as you can. Eventually, you'll probably win because they want to close out the claim. Some of the things we had to do, we had to put tempered dual pane windows. Now, we're in a little different, we're not as urban as you are. We're a little bit on the fringe. They're called the wildland urban interface. So we have more code requirements to meet. We had to put interior fire sprinklers. That's $6,000 that normally you wouldn't have to put in. Up here, you may have earthquake improvements depending on how old your house is. Just some examples. Inflation guard, I kind of covered it. Just make sure your policy has it or not, and find out what the actual numbers are based on your inflation guard. I think you guys have already done this, but this money doesn't come from your rebuilding coverage A. It's another pot of money based on a percentage of your coverage A. So don't rob from your rebuild to pay for your demolition and site clearing. Landscaping, this is interesting. Again, it's a separate pot of money, separate from your rebuilding account that should be in your policy. So you want to ask the questions. You're almost assuredly underinsured. Now again, ours is a little different situation. We had some 50-foot pine trees along one side of our property. Cost me almost $5,000 just to take those out after the fire. So that took a lot of our landscaping money away. So I'm going to recommend just make every effort to get your maximum landscaping allowance from that percentage, because if you had mature plants, you're probably not going to be planting mature plants. You should be compensated for that. And there are things such as landscaping scope of loss. So if there's any questions about what it's going to take to re-landscape your property, there are landscape contractors or some nurseries that do landscaping that might provide you a scope of loss if you can list all the plants and other aspects of your landscape that you lost. Other structures, I didn't know what this meant either. I thought, oh, I have 2 sheds, that's all it's going to cover. It's more than that. Again, don't rob from your rebuild account to do anything outside of your house that's what I call hardscape or a rigid, non-living part of your landscape. It's things like fencing, sidewalks, driveways, irrigation, drainage, retaining walls, and of course, if you had sheds. It should all come out of that separate landscaping pot of money. I have to say a little bit about your mortgage holder if you have a mortgage. And I'll say what we've said about other entities. Your lender is not your friend, and I was amazed. Just be prepared to battle to get releases of your money, to get your rebuild underway and progressing. And you've probably already seen this. I always thought insurance just pays me a check and I'm ready to go. I can rebuild my house. Well, no, they pay the check to you and your lender. The lender makes you sign it over to them, and they manage your money for you. And they have release schedules. In our case, the release schedules didn't match the construction schedules. So if I went with their release schedules, my construction project would have stopped dead in the water. So I can't tell you how many hours and hours and tens of hours I called back to Ohio to my lender to just try to negotiate this. It was a battle. Just be prepared. The lenders are not, they don't seem to understand what you're going through, bottom line. All right, my lovely wife can come.
Organized from the get-go, so our receipts were already going into the right folders, so that we would have our documentation stay on top of it. Get on your list early. If you haven't started it, it's amazing how quickly your mind starts to fade on the small details. And we were constantly asking ourselves, did we get that on the list? Every time, every conversation, it seemed like we had stuff that we were asking ourselves it was on the list. So the sooner you get it on your list going, and you're going to keep adding to it all the time, the better off you'll be. We had, Hartford sent out a third-party company called Inservio.com that got us started on our list. But you guys have these great flash drives that look like they've already got that going for you. So I gave you that website because I didn't realize you were going to have those flash drives. So you may not need Inservio, but there are companies out there to help you with that. At the very least, get the item, the estimated replacement cost, and make sure you include sales tax, because that's a big chunk of money that, we forgot about that for quite a while, that needs to be included on there. And we broke it down. We just went room by room and, close our eyes and just go around the room and do a brain dump of everything we could envision that we had. We would mentally open up drawers and try to remember everything that was in there. But, we did a lot of backtracking as we were remembering things over, the next 2 years intensely. Go ahead. Keep a little notebook in your pocket or wife's purse, whatever. Every time we were at the store, we saw something. We said, hey, we had one of those. So we were writing down the price, so we already had the estimated replacement cost right there. We batched a lot of items. Hartford gave us no problem with that, so there were a lot of items that we were able to just chunk, but that didn't make the list any shorter, really. We had hundreds of pages of contents. And make sure you list everything, even though insurance might tell you it's not covered. We kept stuff on there that they said wasn't covered, just because that's our most complete and comprehensive collection of everything we lost, and we want it to be there. And we just wanted to force them to deny us. If they wanted to really go out of their way to say that's not covered and deduct it, fine. But we were going to press for everything we could get because it was a genuine loss. Yes, okay, go ahead. To the next slide. Refine your list regularly. This was just an ongoing event, and we didn't close out our list until August of '09. That was 22 months after the fire. We just kept working it and working it. I think our insurer got pretty tired of us wanting to keep working it. They wanted to try to close it out, but that was only going to benefit them. We just said, no, we're still working it. We want to make sure we got everything on there. We wanted to make sure we got every dime back that we could possibly be eligible for. And we still didn't meet our contents limit on our policy. We tried, but just couldn't make it. Some items shouldn't be depreciated. Your fine china, your silverware, your crystal, antiques, stuff like that. United Policyholders has a great page on all the stuff with depreciation schedule, which was of immense help, and we used that as proof with our insurer when they tried to depreciate stuff that they shouldn't. So they went in and they made those adjustments, and it made a lot of difference for us on the bottom line. And at the end of it all, when they could see that we had pretty much replaced, I mean, you're not going to replace everything you had because there's stuff that you no longer need or want, but they ended up, after we were done, giving us the full replacement value of everything that was on the list, not just the stuff we replaced. But that's just the way they worked it. And we felt fortunate that that was the way they wanted to handle it. Go ahead. Loss of use. Sometimes there are expenses related to your in your displaced situation that you don't think of that apply. We, when we lost the house, we had a cell phone plan that was clearly inadequate for the volume of calls we were now going to have to handle strictly from our cell phones because we had no landline until we got relocated. So we went over our minutes by a huge amount that first month after the fire, and that we made sure we got reimbursed for that amount. And then we upgraded our plan during that period, during the year and a half or so after that, until we felt things had stabilized and we were not going to need those extra minutes on our cell phone plan. And we made sure that that extra cost of those things was all being reimbursed. And the insurance company didn't challenge us on us at all because we could demonstrate that those were all directly related to being displaced from the fire. We had utilities running at the rebuild site, even though we're living in another place and paying utilities. Those utilities that are going on at the rebuild site become additional living expenses, like if you're keeping water going to keep any existing landscaping going, even though you're rebuilding around it. And electricity, we had to bring in electric there, so we had those bills. And so make sure that you include those. Just ask yourself, everything that will cost you that you wouldn't have had to pay for because of the fire should qualify as an additional living expense. And there's money that the insurance will pay for that. I think that's, okay, go to the next slide. Whoops. We lost our comments on closing thoughts. Good thing I have it written down. The one thing we learned most is politely challenge things that you don't agree with. The insurance company is not gospel on what should be done, what can be done, what will be done, especially if you've got the proof. I think I'm okay, but thanks. Especially if you have proof that they are wrong and you are right. Insurance, they didn't give us that hard of a time because we showed that we had the information to justify it. Getting organized gives you a sense of control over something at a time when you really don't feel like you have a lot of control over a lot of things. This process is long, and there are times where you feel like you just aren't in a position of control. So those things you can control, make sure that you stay on top of them. It'll make you feel more confident about where you're going. Get everything in writing. Insurance companies are loath to put stuff in writing. I think they don't want it to be held against them later. So that's pretty hard to get, but I then went out of my way to document all my conversations that I had with them, and then I would send it to them and say, this is just to document the conversation we had on such and such a date about X, Y, and Z, so that we were all on the record. And they could tell I was covering our rear end in case something came up later. Stay directly involved in the claim and in the construction project. I think that when you're hands-on, you can keep it moving, and there isn't somebody to throw a monkey wrench and stuff. So I think that's more important, is just being personally involved. And just keep in mind, this is a big elephant. Ken likes to use this term that you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time, and this is just one big project that you just have to take one bite at a time, and you do get over it.
So I want to make sure that we get to your questions. So instead of going through my part of the presentation, I think I'm just going to point out to you all what we have in the back. And my hope is that we'll work with the city to try to make these available in the section of the website that was put together for all of the homeowners so that you all can access those materials online. So just kind of quickly so you know what we have here, there is a resource guide that we put together. Many of the things that Ken and Nancy touched on, we also put in there, really helping you to think through, are you prepared to start having those conversations with your contractor or vendor? Do you know what you're going to need? Have you thought about the spec sheet that was mentioned earlier? And then how do you go about finding the right contractor or vendor? And to assist you all with that process, we did work on pulling together a referral list of different architects, contractors, and vendors that Rebuilding Together Peninsula has worked with, but also these are some vendors and contractors that the city recommended, folks from the Central Labor Council, the unions, as well as the National Association for the Remodeling Industry, or NARI. And so we talked to all those folks. They understand kind of the situation that you all are in, because it is more complex. Not every contractor is going to be a good fit for really working with all of you. And so all of the folks who are here are understanding of your situation, willing to work with you, and have been vetted and have a little bit of information here. So it's just a resource for all of you. And then again, the resource guide offers you some general questions to think about along the process, what to look for when you're comparing bids, how to look through the details of your contract, making sure that key details are included in those contracts for the rebuilding process, and then finally thinking about how you have those day-to-day conversations in working with your contractor to make sure that that process is also smooth and that you can end up in your home in the end and move on with your lives, as Ken and Nancy have. And that is our goal as Rebuilding Together Peninsula, to make sure that you all get connected with the resources that are out there to get these key repairs done for you. So on that note, I want to move on and give you all a chance to ask some questions. So we have a microphone up here at the front. If you'd like to just state your name and who you'd like to direct the question to, whether it's Aaron, maybe some questions about, there's been a lot of talk about code upgrades. So I don't know if there's questions for Aaron about that piece, or for Amy and United Policy Holders, or Ken and Nancy based on their own experience, or if I can be of help. We also have some contractors who are here who also can provide some general explanation of the processes, if that's helpful to you as well. So does anybody have any questions that you'd like to bring up at this time? Sure, come on up.
I have questions for Ken and Nancy. First of all, in Servio, does that charge for their services come out of your policy?
No, Hartford paid for that.
Okay.
Hartford initiated that and sent them out. It was never any kind of an expense against our insurance policy at all.
Okay. My second question is, a lot of us are concerned about whether we want to rebuild at all. Did you go through that quandary of whether you wanted to rebuild, or was that a given for you?
We knew we were going to rebuild, but there were some people in our neighborhood who were clearly on the fence. Do you want to comment more on that one, Ken? There were some who they sold their interest to a builder who wanted to buy that land and redevelop it for someone else, and that worked out well for them. They could see that it was beyond their ability or desire to take on that kind of a project. So
you want to consider, you don't get that 50% total loss part of the money if you decide to walk away. You just get your basic coverage, especially now with home real estate values kind of depressed. It's a little tougher decision to just take that basic money and leave, as opposed to rebuilding a house where you get more value out of it. So again, I'm not a financial planner, but you have to kind of run the numbers and make sure.
Thank you.
So I want to add that the intention tonight wasn't to cover every possible issue, and we actually wanted to kind of gauge a little bit of where people want more information. And we did, in their community and many other communities, offer like a one-night program just about rebuild or buy to help people make that financial decision. And of course here, you have this extra curveball with one of the PG&E programs would buy you out. And so I'm very much interested, if Carrie wants to partner again, in doing a follow-up program on this decision. rebuild or buy, because there are a lot of factors, and we usually will bring in a financial planner, and just to kind of lay out some of the considerations. And maybe we've actually done programs where we've had like a tax person come, but anyway, go ahead.
So I have a question maybe for Amy. In terms of what pot of money the architect fees come out of?
Well, that would be generally your coverage A, unless
Okay.
you have, some policies have some extra coverage for claim-related expenses. Masood, if you wanted to address that.
Typically coverage A.
Yeah. So, and
Because-
that's Masood Khan with the Greenspan Company, and they're local in this area.
And then I'm not sure that scope of loss takes that into consideration for their architect fees.
Well, I mean, you can't rebuild a house without having
Right.
plans. The city's not going to let you do it. So it's a necessary expense portion. And again, for your community, your challenge is tallying all these numbers up and then worrying about what might not be covered, and then going to PG&E and getting them to pay for whatever's not covered. So it's less of a concern as far as who's going to pay. It's more of a concern of how much do you need.
Let me just add something. In our own experience, we actually used a designer. Architects are usually higher end, a little more expense, or a lot more expense actually. It just depends on your comfort level. I'm got some background in manufacturing facilities, so I knew what I wanted in a design, so I basically told the designer how to design it, and he did all the blueprints. It saved probably $15,000 to $20,000. So you do have to be careful. If you hire an architect because you want something different or you don't feel comfortable in your design skills, it does come out of your rebuild, and architects can get kind of pricey depending on how fancy you're going to get. So you do have to be careful.
And then I had another question as well. I don't know if it's necessarily a group question, but initially our insurance was saying we'd get a certain amount of money for the house back. And then they said, oh, based on your appraisal, it's less than what we were going to give you. So at this point, we're not sure. I haven't contacted my insurance company about it. But I'm not sure if they're going to stick to what they said the first time or go with our appraisal amount. Mm-hmm.
So you had an appraisal for your house based on that insurance did for you?
Mm-hmm.
And then, and so you're trying to, but they're saying that the coverage that they were going to give to you.
Is greater than the appraisal of the house.
Are you saying they did an appraised, like, real estate value? Is your house a partial
No.
total?
Yeah, we bought it 3 weeks before the fire.
Ah, okay. But, one of the common mistakes is what you paid for the house has nothing really to do with how much it would cost to put it back. It's really apples and oranges. So I'm not even sure. Maybe they appraised it for purposes of actual cash value. That were they offering you some sort of upfront lump sum payment to get you started? Because generally speaking, the appraised value is not really going to come into play
Right.
unless they're making you some sort of cash advance offer. But no matter what, you do have to tally up that theoretical, how much would it cost if I were going to rebuild it, even if you have no intention of doing it.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, this question is for the city. And Aaron, you mentioned something about the city will go over the plans and the architect's drawings and approve or disapprove. And what I'm wondering is how San Bruno is going to control visually what gets put back, because many neighborhoods, it's very obvious when new structures go in and you have a lovely single-floor home that's 50 years old next to a 2.5-story, 2010 home, And how's the city going to keep unity within the neighborhood?
We coincidentally just adopted 3 months before this happened something called residential design guidelines. And those were exactly because of situations that you saw out there where there were homes that were just built too big, large, next to smaller homes, or one that was completely out of context architecturally from the existing neighborhood. So we just adopted these residential design guidelines, and they're really not a document that's there to restrict creativity if you want to have a home that meets your individual needs, but it's just something that says when you're going to design a home, take neighborhood context in mind. So we have those, and we worked with architects in the area in developing them, so that's what we'll base our approvals on architecturally.
But that won't be anything that the neighbors will be able to see necessarily.
Well, there's two things. If you, regardless of the size of your home, your home has to be consistent with these residential design guidelines. If you decide to build a home that's bigger than those development standards, what we'll do is we're going to post those homes, the design of those homes, for 10 days on our website and allow anyone to comment on them. I think this window shouldn't be placed here because it's going to look down in my yard, or I think this porch is too high because it looks out of context. And you can post on those, and all those comments will present to the Architectural Review Committee for their consideration. And all the neighbors will also be invited to those homes that exceed any of those development standards to that meeting where that decision is going to be made.
Okay, thanks.
I guess a question for the audience, and Amy brought this up earlier, but we really want to be able to provide some things that are responsive to your needs. And so I guess there was this suggestion about a possible rebuild or buy workshop. Does there seem to be a need or interest from you all, or based on what you're hearing from the other homeowners, about some additional follow-up workshops? And it would be very helpful if we knew kind of what your interests were, and we'd be happy to partner. We're part of what's the resource group, I guess, that's part of the long-term recovery effort for San Bruno that Thrive and American Red Cross are helping to coordinate. So we'd be happy to kind of follow up on those needs. We want to be responsive to you all. Are there other topics or key resources or workshops that you all really feel would benefit you?
Maybe like a vendor fair with some of the referrals that you've given us, or
I just really like the idea of that, weighing out, telling us how to weigh out the options, what it really means. Yeah, I think that'd be an excellent seminar or whatever you do.
Any others?
I just have a little one. Does the city have any plans of repaving all the streets in that community to make it look a little nicer? Not just the affected streets.
Well, obviously, any of the streets that were damaged by the disaster are going to be repaved. Ones that are outside the area that weren't damaged, I don't know the exact details on those. The city has a schedule that they go through for all their streets, and it's dependent upon how bad some other areas are that need paving. But definitely the ones that were impacted by this, the sidewalks, the streets, or any of the infrastructure that was impacted by this is going to be replaced.
When will the properties be surveyed so I can get a fence up?
We're working on that right now. I don't have an exact date. What we're working with is for a PG&E to help us out, obviously, with the cost of that, surveying each of the individual properties. Problem is, a lot of the survey monuments in the area obviously aren't there anymore, so the surveying task is even more than it would be when you're just surveying an individual lot.
Speaking of putting things back, obviously, our home was a corner lot, so it was the power pole was right there, and lots of people have them running through their backyard. So now when power is restored, is there an opportunity to put that underground for some of those homes, or are we just putting up telephone poles again? Do you know?
I'll have to look into that one. I haven't been as involved with the utility end, because my side is usually more the private development, construction type things, but I'll check with our public service director.
Okay, and along those same lines, there was a easement along the back fence, and in the case of our property, there was a concrete, like a gutter, if you will. And just wondering if that will be put back by the city.
I don't know the individual, but usually with those, they're valley gutters, and they're used to take stormwater from one location to the other location.
Right.
So if there's still the necessity to take the stormwater from point A to point B, most likely, yes, it will be placed back.
Yeah, it's still a hill. It's still.
Yeah, so yes, sometimes you can pull it, if you go up the stormwater, to go underground, but if not, there will be some type of.
Okay. And in regards to the other person who is asking about the survey, our insurance person has sent someone out to survey. So both, the city will be doing that as well?
No, the first answer is, usually it is the private property owner's responsibility to get their own. Usually insurance companies help facilitate that process of getting the every property surveyed for the individual property owner. But since there's so many at the same time, what we're looking into right now is getting it done. Working with PG&E to get it funded, to get them all done at the same time. That way there's some economies of scale when you're getting all the lots done at one time rather than each individual homeowner having to go and get it.
Okay.
So, in terms of the Rebuild or Buy workshop, can I get a quick show of hands? I mean, it would just be kind of generally helpful. Okay, so we'll start talking, and we'll see about that kind of follow-up. How about for the vendor fair? Okay. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So Amy and I will do some more talking to see how we can make these events happen for you all. And we'll certainly continue to be in touch with you all through the city. That was how we did a lot of our outreach and through Thrive as well. And we'll definitely try to get all of our materials from tonight, at least up to the city's website. Erin, if you could help us with that. And we thank you all for spending your evening with us. And certainly we'll all be around if you have some more private questions that you'd like to ask of us. Thank you.